I think we need to start with the splitting of the atom, and we need to ask what made it possible to create such a diabolical weapon from splitting matter. Where did our attitude to matter originate? And to answer that question, we have to go back through the history of the patriarchal religions and see how they put the huge emphasis of their teaching on the transcendence of spirit. And matter was really downgraded, almost from Plato onwards, but certainly deeply embedded in the Christian tradition and the Christian teaching. Matter was contaminated. Matter was contaminated by the fall and by original sin. And that really came to the fore in the 4th century. So that's the origin of it, how it became possible to treat matter in the way that we did, without understanding that it was, in fact, a sacrilegious act, what we did. We didn't realize that matter was a part of spirit, because matter had been split off from spirit. Therefore, matter wasn't sacred. Therefore, we could do anything we wanted with matter and with nature. We could use both of them to our own advantage. And that is deeply embedded not only in the Christian tradition, but also in the secular tradition, since religion has been dispensed with in secular culture. So that is where I think we came to create this terrible weapon, and why it seemed a perfectly good idea at the time, because it was necessary in order to prevent Germany obtaining the weapon before us. We had to get in there first. Hence, Oppenheimer developed it, and afterwards deeply regretted what he'd done. But that really is really where the whole train of the power chain of nuclear weapons, I think, started. But we really have to look into the philosophy and the religious history of what led to our beginning, our being able to regard matter in this way as something that we could do what we wanted with. Because in a way, in splitting the atom, we've split the human psyche, and we're living with the results now in the general disintegration of our culture and the decadence and the warring elements within it. And I think that in order to understand why governments, the 9 nuclear powers, are so reluctant to relinquish this weapon, we have to understand the power of fear, and fear being behind the desire to maintain their power, and also a sense of responsibility to their populations. But it's also the power that gets you to the top table, gets you to sit in the Security Council. You're above all the other nations in the world, so you think, and you're not going to relinquish that power gladly. The problem with the human mind is the absence of the feminine principle, because for the last 4,000 years, society all over the world has really been ruled by the masculine principle. It is men who have controlled everything, men who've taken the decisions, men who've created the religions, men who've really dominated the whole scene of the planet. There hasn't been any relationship with the planet, with the exception of the indigenous cultures who did maintain that connection. They never lost the feeling that matter and the earth was sacred. But the general political scenario of the last 4,000 years is treating the earth as if it was something that we owned, really, something that our species was superior to. And the lack of the feminine principle is absolutely essential to understand how all this happened, because the feminine principle begins to disappear around 2000 BC with the disappearance of the goddess, who always held the values which respected the heart and the connection with nature, and respected the connection above all with the harmony of the cosmos. And that's something we've completely lost, because we've become disconnected from the cosmos and disconnected from any sense of needing to be connected. and to watch what we're doing in order to keep ourselves on the right path. We've gone on the wrong path for a very, very long time, ever since we lost the feminine archetype. And as I say, that began around 2000 BC, but it came to the head in the 4th century in the great Christian councils, when the Holy Spirit, which had always been feminine, was changed into the masculine gender at the Council of Nicaea. And from that time, it's as if we lost one arm or one half of ourselves or one half of our brain. We simply haven't been functioning on all cylinders. And this is something we need to get back, and very, very urgently. And this is what has led, the lack of balance between the masculine and the feminine archetypes has led to the lack of balance in our entire culture, because we've exported from the West our belief system and our secular attitude. And we still, some of us say that we are Christians, but there's nothing whatsoever Christian about holding these weapons. And it's something that really hasn't been recognized. And the second thing that's important is that what happened with the psyche was that the conscious mind became disconnected from the unconscious, from the matrix of consciousness, out of which the conscious mind has emerged. And this is not known in the culture. We have people identify themselves with their conscious mind alone, and they have no awareness that there's another huge part of themselves, like the base of the pyramid or the hidden part of an iceberg, that is the unconscious aspect of themselves. And the unconscious holds all our instinctive feelings. So we've cut off the heart perception, we've cut off the feminine, and we're left with the rational brain, which isn't rational because it's disconnected, it's not whole. And the judgments and decisions that it makes are very plausible in the context that they may be made. But they're leaving out, as I said, the whole base of the pyramid and the whole context of what we really are as human beings. And if you do that, you lose your humanity. And that's what's happened. We've lost our humanity. And we've lost the capacity to judge and recognize why we've lost it and where we've lost it and how we've lost it. So bringing all this back is a huge spiritual endeavor, if you like, but I don't see any sign of it in government. I don't think one should look to government for that, but I do see it in the movements all over the world of people trying to help each other, of people being against these weapons, like the 122 nations who've just signed that agreement. They know that they are wrong, and they are actually diabolical, and one should use that word, or demonic if you like, because we have the capacity as human beings to be both divine and demonic. We can be either. We have the choice, and this is really the time of choice when we have to decide, are we going to continue on this path, which is a false path, as I've said, a dangerous path, or are we going to come together and say, this whole scenario has to end, we have to give up these weapons as a people, as a planetary people, if you like. We have to take this decision on behalf of the planet and on behalf of ourselves and our children and our children's children. And as I say, this is something indigenous cultures have never lost, the awareness that they have a responsibility towards their children, and under the 7th generation, really. I think that we need to learn from the indigenous peoples, because for some 50,000 years they've never lost the understanding that they are part of the environment in which we're living in. They're not separate from it. And in fact, they've been appealing to us over and over again in the last 20 years, saying, wake up and see what you're doing to the earth. Wake up and take on your responsibility. Change course, get in touch with the cosmos again. Get in touch with the earth, your mother. And this is something we've completely lost in losing the feminine principle. We've lost the awareness that the earth is our mother, and that we depend on the mother for our food and our shelter and everything else that makes life worth living. And if we forget the mother and turn to this ridiculous materialism, which is a substitute for mother, because matter means actually mater, comes from the Latin word mother. We are devoured by what we've rejected, what we've become separate from. So the indigenous peoples are saying, wake up and undo, if you can, the harm that you've done to your mother. Recognize that fracking is harmful to her. Recognize that all this oil extraction is harmful. You're really raping the earth, they would say. You're raping your mother. What sort of a scenario is that? And so I think we need to listen. It's time to listen. And it's time to change our ways of behavior, and it's time to challenge governments who usually pursue the path of power and money. But we need to look at the morality of what we're doing, because that is what we've lost. We've lost the moral compass, which would tell us you've taken the wrong path and you need to get back on track, and quickly. So that is all to do with recovering the feminine principle. It's recovering the principle relationship with the earth, relationship with the cosmos, as I've tried to explain in my Dream of the Cosmos, my book, which took 20 years to write. It explains why we lost the connection to the cosmos, which ancient civilizations always had. They built great temples oriented on the stars and the constellations, and they did that knowing exactly what they were doing, because they believed that in keeping in harmony and keeping in touch with the harmony of the cosmos, their earthly communities would be governed properly, they would have the right laws. And in fact, many of their laws came from their dreams. They had great dreamers in those days. And we've lost the capacity to dream in our modern secular culture, which is so eaten up with keeping up with Facebook or Twitter. All these are irrelevancies, total irrelevancies to what we should be doing. And we need to look at the morality of the way we lead our lives and invite the indigenous people to teach us, to tell us what we've lost. They're ready to teach us, and many of them are very articulate, particularly in America and Australia and South America. They would love to tell what they call their younger brother what elder brother knows. This is so important. It's all part of the package of trying to understand why we've taken such a wrong path in developing these terrible weapons, why they're truly demonic, and why, as I say in my book, they pollute the earth. I use that phrase deliberately. They pollute the earth. And the earth would love to be rid of them, throw them off, because the residue lasts millions of years. You can't get rid of the plutonium. You can't bury it in the sea and be sure that it won't ever arise again. You can't bury it in the earth, in deep caves, because you don't know if the earth will shift and there'll be earthquakes. You cannot get rid of it, and it's just an illusion to think that we can, and that's all part of the illusion that we're protected by these weapons, when in fact they're the greatest danger to both psyche and body and to the earth itself that has ever come upon our planet. And when you think of our precious planet, how beautiful it is, how incredible it is with all the life we've seen in David Attenborough's marvelous programs, the life that it holds and nourishes, do we want to destroy all that? And who are we to dare to destroy it? Who are we to dare to undo God's creation? I think we have to look at what has happened to the human psyche or the human mind in becoming separated from the unconscious, from the deep matrix of consciousness, and from the deep feminine. Because what's happened is that we're living at a very superficial level, and you can see it in the superficiality of our culture, the kind of films that are popular on television. Not the wonderful programs on the Bake Off, for instance, or something like that, because they actually nourish the soul and put us in touch with matter again as something marvelous that we can work with, not dominate, but work with. And all this is very important for bringing in the heart, which has been split off again by the mind. The whole focus of our attention is on the rational mind. No attention is paid to the heart. And yet the heart is our connection to the right hemisphere of the brain and to the soul, that neglected aspect of ourselves that nobody recognizes exists anymore. So we've virtually lost our soul, we've lost touch with the heart and the values of the heart, because they're the ones that lead us to the feelings of compassion, love for other people, respect for animals. Love for animals, if you watch the wonderful super vet programs, he loves animals. And the people who bring the animals to him, they love their animals. So that is the quality of love that is missing in our level of government and in our level of relations between nations. We have to somehow recover or develop that capacity for love that we've lost. We can see it with the animals and with our children, but we need to develop that capacity for love and compassion in relation to all life on earth and all other people, no matter how terrible they are, how wicked they are, how evil they are. They need love because they are the way they are, because they have no understanding or no experience of love. Their hearts have been shriveled and turned to ice, if you like. So all this is to do with recovering the feminine principle, rebalancing the culture by having the feminine as well as the masculine, or in terms of yin and yang, you could say we've got far too much yang. We're absolutely saturated with yang. All the drivings, having to achieve, having to succeed, having to reach the top, all that is yang energy, and it is utterly unbalanced by yin. Where's the yin in all this? Where's the feminine principle? Where's the voice which says you don't have to do all this achievement? You don't have to be at the top. You don't have to sit in the Security Council. There are other things that are more important. And the other things are the capacity to love and the capacity to develop compassion and relationship with all living things, as the Indigenous peoples are urging us to do. The biggest enemy that we've carried for thousands of years is fear of death. Because we believe that death is the end, and that now we're even told by science that it is the end, the physical brain is the death of consciousness, we are left in a state of perpetual fear. And it is that fear of death that's been driving all this yang energy, that we have to get beyond it, we have to be more powerful, we have to have artificial intelligence, we have to develop robots, we have to dominate the universe. All this comes from really fear of death. At the very root of it all is the root of the neurosis that we have to be more powerful. So what we have to do is understand that we are divine beings. We carry divinity in every cell of our body, in every atom of our mind. We are part of the divinity of the universe, something that nobody talks about nowadays because we're told that the universe is dead and it has no consciousness, and that we are the only conscious beings in it. This is total rubbish. And I love to be able to say this at last, because I've been sitting on it I'm now 86, I've been sitting on it for 40 years at least. And we are divine beings. And even Parmenides, the great Greek philosopher, he said we are divine beings having a human experience. And when we die, we go on to other dimensions of the universe that science hasn't discovered yet, but which exist and which have been known to exist by alchemists and hermeticists and indigenous peoples for thousands of years. We are the most ignorant people on the planet, and we don't know it. So can we bring it back? Yes, we can, because we're an extraordinary species. And if we're humble enough to listen and to learn from those of us who do know a little bit more, and that's not just me, it's many other people on the planet, we can change our whole consciousness. We're not sinful people condemned since the myth of the fall to live in sorrow and suffering on this planet. We are given the tremendous privilege of living here in this wonderful environment, which we've improved with our science and our technology, made things much easier for us to live with electricity and with heat, etc. But we've lost our humility, and we've lost our understanding that we are part of everything that is. And that, in fact, we are surrounded by a great web of light, which in India is called the net of Indra, which embraces every atom of life in the whole cosmos, in the whole universe. There's nothing that is separate from anything else. And this is in fact what science is telling us now, and we need to understand it and apply it, because it hasn't been applied yet in our lives. If we understand that there's no separation between any of us or between what we are living within, then we have to change our attitude. If we understand that the whole is a divine creation, then we have to treat it and every atom of it as something divine and precious, something that we will honor and protect and serve. We are not here to dominate, we're here to serve. And this is something that's so important for us to learn. But we can misuse our divinity as well as use it in a compassionate and loving way. We have the choice between using it to destroy and using it to create. And we can create something wonderful if we can just turn our consciousness around, reconnect with the unconscious, reconnect with the feminine, honor the feminine as equal of value to the masculine. And this idea of rivalry has entered into the whole relationship between men and women, creating enormous, quite unnecessary suffering between them, because men need to respect women as an absolutely vital aspect of themselves. And similarly, women need to respect men as a vital aspect of themselves. Together they can do wonders, but fighting with each other or trying to be equal with each other is just rubbish, because you can't be equal when you're different, when you're complementary, when you have something to offer that the other may not have. But together you make a united and harmonious whole.